I'm not here to lie. The reason why I wanted you guys to come here and do the interview here is to show you exactly where everything took place. And to show people that this is what happened.
Morning of May 2nd, take me through what happened.
Okay, I was up at 6 o'clock, called me at 8:48 and asked me if I wanted to go to town with them. And I
In every missing child case, the public searches for something solid, something that feels like truth. And for decades, polygraph tests have carried an almost mythical reputation. A machine that can read honesty, a device that claims to separate truth from deception. But in the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, those polygraph results have created more questions than answers. When court documents were released, they revealed that both Malehya Brooks-Murray and Daniel Martell took voluntary polygraph tests in the early days of the investigation. RCMP confirmed that both passed. Other family members also took polygraphs, with most being labeled truthful. For many viewers, that sounds definitive, almost like closure, but the story isn't that simple. Experts warn that polygraphs don't measure truth. They measure stress, pressure, fear, and physical reactions, factors that can spike in innocent people and remain steady in those who hide emotions well. So, if these tests don't truly measure honesty, what do the results tell us about the Sullivan investigation? Tonight, we revisit the facts from the newly released court documents, break down the role polygraph testing actually plays, and ask a troubling but necessary question, in a case where nearly everyone passed. Can the polygraph test itself be trusted? This is the latest update in the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. In any missing child investigation, the first hours are the most chaotic. Investigators must work quickly, verify every timeline, and rule out every possibility before drawing conclusions. That is exactly what happened on May 2nd, when Lilly and Jack Sullivan were reported missing. RCMP immediately launched a broad inquiry, ensuring every individual connected to the children was examined carefully and thoroughly. According to newly released court documents obtained by CBC, The Globe and Mail, and the Canadian Press, RCMP sought access to the electronic data of Malehya Brooks-Murray and her partner, Daniel Martell. Between May 1st at 2:25 p.m. and May 2nd at 10:27 a.m. this data request is standard practice in missing persons cases, meant to confirm timelines and validate statements given to investigators. The access orders included GPS coordinates, cell tower locations, bank transaction histories, and information from TextPlus, a Wi-Fi calling app that Malehya used. Even though she had deleted the app by early July, RCMP was still able to retrieve her account history. These steps ensured that investigators had a clear view of every movement and communication during the crucial hours surrounding the children's disappearance. RCMP also checked on the children's biological father, Cody Sullivan, after Malehya called police at 12:45 a.m. on May 3rd with a concern that he might have taken them. Officers visited his home at 2:50 a.m., confirming he had not seen Jack or Lilly for 3 years. Despite later tips claiming he had been spotted in New Brunswick, RCMP confirmed he was still in Nova Scotia. One detail that stood out in the documents was that both Daniel and Malehya voluntarily took polygraph examinations on May 12, just 10 days after the children disappeared. According to RCMP reports, both individuals passed. The questions they were asked focused directly on whether they had caused harm to the children or knew what happened to them. However, the same court documents reveal that as of July 16th, investigators did not believe the case was criminal in nature. An RCMP investigator wrote, "I do not have reasonable grounds to believe a criminal offense has occurred. This shows that polygraph results were being used to eliminate investigative directions, not to accuse or clear anyone definitively." Polygraphs often confuse the public. A pass does not confirm truthfulness. It only means the machine did not detect physiological stress associated with deception. In a high-stress situation like a missing child case, many factors, fear, exhaustion, trauma, can influence responses. RCMP understands this, which is why polygraphs are not used as evidence, only as supplemental tools. The documents also show that several family members underwent polygraph tests. Daniel's mother, Janie Mackenzie, was tested on June 10th, but her physiology was not suitable for analysis, meaning no opinion could be reached. Meanwhile, the children's maternal grandmother, Cindy Brooks-Murray, and her partner both passed their examinations. Cody Sullivan, the children's biological father, completed his polygraph on June 12 and was deemed truthful. These tests helped investigators close informational gaps and verify that major figures in the children's lives had provided consistent statements regarding their whereabouts before May 2. Beyond polygraphs, RCMP conducted an extensive ground search. The effort spanned more than 8.5 square kilometers, covering dense forests, wells, mine shafts, waterways, and old roads. Helicopters, drones, and hundreds of trained search and rescue volunteers were deployed. Polygraph results were only one small fragment of an investigation that relied primarily on physical evidence and verified timelines. Polygraph misunderstandings often come from the belief that the test detects lies. In reality, it detects changes in bodily functions. An innocent person under immense stress may fail, while someone who controls their emotions well may pass, even when withholding information. This is why polygraph results must be interpreted cautiously. According to the documents, Daniel himself requested a polygraph early in the investigation. He stated he had nothing to hide and wanted to demonstrate full cooperation with police. This suggests that participation in these tests was not driven by pressure from RCMP but by an effort to address mounting public scrutiny. Similarly, Malehya agreed to a polygraph to eliminate her as a suspect and demonstrate transparency. An investigator stated that the purpose of the tests was to rule out possibilities, not to establish guilt. This distinction is essential. The test helps guide the investigation, not define it. As the days passed, polygraphs became a talking point for the public. But within the RCMP investigation, they remained a secondary tool. They cannot determine the children's location, reconstruct events, or prove what happened. They only reveal how a person's body reacted during questioning on a particular day. The fact that almost everyone passed became a source of confusion and debate online. Some believed this meant everyone was truthful. Others argued it proved the tests were unreliable. The reality lies somewhere in the middle. Polygraphs simply don't provide absolute answers. RCMP continued to gather evidence beyond the tests. With more than 740 tips and over 9,300 public videos submitted, investigators were forced to sift through an overwhelming number of leads. The polygraph results did not slow or alter the broader investigation, which remained active and multi-layered. In the end, polygraphs serve best when placed in context. They cannot reveal the fate of Lilly and Jack, nor can they confirm or deny any scenario. They are tools, imperfect, limited, and heavily dependent on the emotional state of the person being tested. Yet, polygraphs often shape public perception. Hearing that someone passed can create a sense of trust, just as a failure can ignite suspicion. But these reactions are based on misunderstanding. The machine does not detect truth, it detects stress, and stress does not equal guilt. This is why, in the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, polygraph results should not be seen as definitive. They are only one component of a much larger investigative effort. What matters most are facts, timelines, verified evidence, and continued searches, because the truth about what happened to Lilly and Jack will never be found through a machine reading alone. Polygraph testing often becomes a flashpoint in public discussions, especially when used in sensitive investigations. In the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the test results prompted a wave of debate online. Many viewers wanted clarity, while others questioned the reliability of the method itself. Part 2 focuses on what the CBC documents actually revealed about how RCMP handled this tool. The court records made one thing clear: RCMP relied heavily on verified data rather than emotional interpretation. They analyzed phone logs, GPS signals, banking transactions, and app activity. The polygraph tests were only one component of this broader investigative map. Every detail had to align before an assessment could be made. RCMP member CPL Charlene Kerr wrote that electronic data allowed investigators to track the historical locations of devices and validate communication logs. This information was essential because it provided an objective baseline. The polygraph results were then compared against this objective trail to check for consistency. One of the most discussed findings was that both Malehya Brooks-Murray and Daniel Martell participated willingly in their polygraph tests. Voluntary participation carries symbolic weight in public perception, but investigators treated the results cautiously. A pass did not close any line of inquiry, and a fail would not have been definitive either. The CBC documents also noted that an RCMP investigator explicitly wrote that they did not have grounds to consider the situation a criminal matter at that stage. This is a key point. Polygraph results were a supporting element, not the foundation of the investigation. The inquiry remained under the Missing Persons Act rather than a criminal framework. In reviewing the role of the polygraph, it's important to understand how RCMP used it. The test was conducted to help investigators decide which avenues to prioritize. It helped determine whether statements aligned with physiological responses, but it never served as proof or dismissal of any scenario. This is standard practice in similar cases across Canada. The documents also highlighted that multiple relatives took the test. This showed a willingness among family members to be fully transparent with RCMP. However, the outcomes varied. For example, Daniel's mother underwent testing but did not produce analyzable readings due to physiological factors. This demonstrates a limitation of the technique. Meanwhile, other relatives, including the children's grandmother and her partner, were described as truthful based on the test readings. These results helped investigators validate portions of the timeline and eliminate unnecessary speculation. But again, they represented one puzzle piece, not the whole picture. The polygraph results, combined with GPS and communication data, helped narrow gaps in the family's recollection of the previous days. For example, the documents describe how the family ran errands on April 30th and May 1st, and how investigators reviewed camera footage, store receipts, and travel times to confirm this timeline. Police even gathered footage from the Cobequid Pass toll plaza to verify that the children did not travel out of the area. These verifiable data points were more reliable than anything produced by a polygraph. The test simply added another layer of observational detail. Court records also revealed that RCMP obtained a detailed breakdown of calls, texts, and app usage from the devices associated with Malehya and Daniel. These digital footprints helped confirm whether the individuals were where they said they were. The polygraph results were compared to this timeline to check for internal consistency. As the investigation continued, the polygraph tests remained relevant only as contextual support. They helped determine whether investigators should focus more heavily on physical searches, electronic trails, or third-party tips. At no point were polygraph readings treated as definitive indicators. The emotional pressure surrounding a missing child case can influence polygraph readings. Investigators are trained to account for stress, fatigue, or emotional overwhelm. This is particularly important because the tests for Malehya and Daniel took place only 10 days after the children were reported missing, a period filled with anxiety and confusion. Polygraph outcomes do not confirm what someone knows. They reflect how their body reacts during the questioning. This difference is central to understanding why RCMP did not base any conclusions solely on the tests. It also explains why the public's interpretation often differs from that of trained investigators. The CBC documents reported that both individuals were questioned about the events surrounding the children's disappearance and any actions taken between May 1st and May 2nd. The polygraph readings did not show unusual physiological responses, but investigators still cross-referenced these outcomes with hard data. Meanwhile, search and rescue crews continued exploring the surrounding terrain. Drones, helicopters, and ground teams scanned dense forest and nearby roads. The focus was always on locating Lilly and Jack, not on interpreting physiological metrics from polygraph charts. The documents also mentioned items of interest such as a pink blanket and a child-sized footprint. These findings were examined by forensic teams, offering more concrete investigative value than polygraph outputs. Each physical clue had the potential to reshape the direction of the search. Despite these ongoing efforts, no confirmed sightings or definitive physical evidence emerged. The polygraph tests remained only a part of the background, useful, but not determinative. They helped verify that statements matched the available data, but they could not provide explanations or outcomes. Public interest in the test results grew rapidly as more people followed the case online. Many viewers expected the tests to provide clarity, but investigators consistently emphasized that polygraphs cannot answer the central questions. They can support a timeline, but they cannot reveal where the children are or what occurred. In summary, Part 2 shows that polygraph testing in the Lilly and Jack Sullivan case served a limited yet structured purpose. It was used to assess consistency, not truth. RCMP relied on verifiable timelines, digital records, physical searches, and community tips. The polygraph was only one element within a much larger, methodical investigation. Public attention on the polygraph results increased significantly once the CBC documents were released. Many viewers wondered what it truly meant when multiple people associated with the case received readings labeled as truthful. Part 3 examines why these results created widespread confusion and why they should be interpreted carefully. For many, the idea that everyone passed seemed almost impossible to process. In most cases, public discussions around polygraph tests involve at least one conflicting result. But in the Sullivan investigation, nearly all readings were categorized as consistent. This unusual outcome eventually became one of the most debated aspects of the case. One reason for this confusion is the way polygraph tests are portrayed in popular media. Many people assume the device works like a truth meter. In reality, it measures physiological responses such as breathing, pulse, and skin activity. These indicators can shift for many reasons unrelated to honesty. The emotional environment of a missing child case can strongly influence these results. Stress, lack of sleep, worrying, and uncertainty create physiological reactions that can be interpreted in various ways. Some individuals become extremely reactive, while others become unusually calm. Both conditions can affect polygraph readings. This is why polygraphs can produce unexpected outcomes. A calm person may appear consistent even while facing difficult questions. Meanwhile, someone overwhelmed by fear or confusion may appear inconsistent. The test cannot determine why the body reacts a certain way, it only records the reactions themselves. In the Sullivan investigation, both Malehya and Daniel were tested only 10 days after the children were reported missing. During this time, they had been involved in extensive search efforts, emotional strain, and repeated interviews. Their physical and emotional state could have influenced the polygraph readings in unpredictable ways. Other family members were also experiencing this heightened state of stress. Grandparents, relatives, and Daniel's mother all underwent testing. While most received labels indicating consistency, one test produced readings that could not be evaluated at all. This demonstrates how easily physiological factors can override the machine's ability to interpret data. These variations show why polygraph results cannot be viewed as definitive. They reflect a moment in time, not a universal truth. They also rely on interpretations made by examiners, professionals trained to analyze subtle patterns in charts, but who still must consider external factors like stress or fatigue. The CBC documents make clear that RCMP understood these limitations. Investigators did not use the polygraph tests to confirm or dismiss any scenario. Instead, they used them to compare reactions against verified facts, such as phone records, travel times, and the sequence of events reported by different individuals. Polygraph results can sometimes help identify areas needing further clarification. For instance, if someone shows a strong reaction during a particular question, investigators may revisit that topic. However, no such conclusion was highlighted in the documents for this case. The readings were simply recorded and added to the investigative timeline. One of the reasons the public focus so heavily on the tests is because they are easy to understand on a surface level. A pass feels reassuring, a fail feels alarming. But these labels can often be misleading without the proper context, which investigators emphasized throughout their work. The broader context in the Sullivan case includes extensive digital verification, community tips, physical searches, and aerial surveys. These components provide measurable data, something a polygraph cannot offer. As a result, RCMP treated the polygraph results as supporting information rather than central evidence. Even within this framework, the fact that multiple people received consistent readings still raised questions online. Some viewers interpreted this as confirmation that no one close to the children had information to hide. Others saw it as a sign that the test might not reflect real answers in a high-stress environment. What these mixed interpretations demonstrate is the emotional weight the case holds for many people. When two young children disappear, the public seeks certainty. Polygraph tests appear to offer certainty, but only on the surface. Without physical evidence or confirmed sightings, there is no simple answer. The RCMP's continued emphasis on physical searches underscores this reality. Search teams remained focused on real-world clues, terrain analysis, and digital tracking. These efforts continued long after the polygraph tests were completed because they offered more potential for answers. The polygraph became a topic of conversation primarily because of its familiarity. People know the term, understand its general purpose, and assume it provides clarity. But the actual value of the test depends entirely on context, and, in the Sullivan case, the context was filled with emotional strain and uncertainty. This is why experts repeatedly urge the public not to place too much weight on such results. A polygraph can support an investigation, but it cannot confirm what happened or why. It does not explain the timeline, the environment, or the whereabouts of the children. Instead, polygraphs help investigators understand how a person physically responded to certain questions. These responses can guide interview strategies, but they cannot answer the central questions. They cannot identify locations, confirm movements, or reveal events that occurred out of sight. In the Sullivan case, the polygraph tests did not produce contradictions that changed the direction of the investigation. They did not provide confirmation or closure. They merely added one more layer to an already complex set of information. Ultimately, Part 3 reveals why polygraph results, despite gaining enormous public attention, held limited practical impact. They offered no breakthrough and no definitive direction. Investigators relied instead on data, timelines, searches, and community involvement. The answers to this case will not come from a machine reading but from continued investigative work. As public discussion grew, one recurring theme was the expectation that polygraph tests should provide simple answers. Many viewers hoped the readings would clarify the situation, point investigators in a clear direction, or remove uncertainty. But as RCMP emphasized, polygraphs cannot offer conclusions. They only provide limited insights based on physical responses. This gap between public expectations and investigative reality shaped much of the online reaction. When people learned that multiple individuals received consistent readings, some interpreted this as strong evidence. Others questioned why the results did not bring measurable progress. These differing interpretations fueled ongoing debate about the test's value. Part of the confusion comes from the lack of visibility into how investigators actually use polygraphs. While the public often sees them as critical tests, RCMP views them as supportive tools. They help identify potential inconsistencies or confirm emotional responses, but they do not drive the overall direction of the investigation. Even the CBC documents reflected this approach. The polygraph results were included in summaries, but they appeared alongside digital timelines, travel logs, financial activity, and search details. The combined data offered a clearer picture than any polygraph reading alone could provide. This reinforced that the test was only one component. In many online spaces, the idea that everyone passed led to polarized reactions. Some believed this meant the case was purely accidental. Others argued that high stress could affect readings. Both interpretations highlight why polygraphs can be easily misunderstood without professional context. RCMP consistently reminded the public that the case remained active under the Missing Persons Act. That meant the primary focus stayed on physical searches, tip evaluation, and forensic review. The polygraph results did not shift the investigative strategy. They neither narrowed nor broadened the search area. As time passed, public frustration grew. Many wanted immediate answers, hoping polygraph results would fill information gaps. But investigators must adhere to verified facts. Without confirmed sightings or physical indicators, polygraphs cannot replace the careful, methodical work required in such cases. The emotional weight of the situation played a large role in how viewers interpreted the results. People naturally seek clarity during uncertainty. A reading labeled truthful seems comforting, but interpreting it as definitive can overshadow the fact that the technology has limitations. RCMP accounted for these limitations throughout the process. Another layer of confusion came from the timing of the tests. Since they were conducted shortly after the children disappeared, emotional strain was extremely high. This can influence physiological responses in unpredictable ways. Investigators took this into account, using the results carefully and cautiously. Meanwhile, digital evidence continued to provide more concrete data. Location signals, app logs, store footage, and transaction records helped confirm the family's movements. These verifiable details carried more investigative weight than any physiological reading could. Polygraph results were compared to these facts but never relied upon. Community involvement also shaped the investigation. With more than 9,300 videos submitted and hundreds of tips provided, RCMP had a massive amount of material to review. Polygraph tests played almost no role in analyzing these tips. Instead, investigators relied on timestamps, geographic markers, and eyewitness accounts. Despite the public's fascination with polygraphs, the most significant aspects of the case were physical searches and verified information. Ground teams, aerial units, and forensic specialists continued exploring the surrounding terrain. This effort highlighted where investigators believed meaningful progress could be made. Still, public interest in the test persisted. Discussions often centered on whether consistent readings across multiple individuals suggested shared accuracy or collective emotional strain. Neither interpretation could be confirmed, underscoring why polygraph results alone cannot be used to form conclusions. The CBC documents repeatedly reminded readers that the polygraph was only used to assess whether physiological responses aligned with statements. It was not used to settle debates, determine accuracy, or eliminate anyone as a possible source of information. Instead, it served as a supplementary reference. At the same time, RCMP expanded their search radius, reviewed camera footage from various locations, and analyzed digital records from multiple devices. The polygraphs did not influence these tasks. Their value was limited to confirming that emotional readings did not contradict the other data investigators had collected. As more people became aware of the polygraph results, speculation increased. Some questioned whether the test could detect subtle inconsistencies. Others wondered if emotional stress could have masked significant reactions. Both perspectives highlight the inherent uncertainty that surrounds polygraphs in sensitive investigations. However, RCMP never suggested that the readings provided answers. They reframed them as part of the investigative landscape, not a determining factor. This approach aligned with professional standards across many agencies, where polygraphs are used cautiously and contextually rather than decisively. What remains clear is that polygraph outcomes cannot reveal the children's location or explain the events surrounding their disappearance. They cannot reconstruct the final timeline or provide new leads. Their function stays limited to reflecting momentary physical responses during structured questioning. For the public, this can feel unsatisfying. People naturally hope for clarity, especially when two young children have been missing for months. But clarity must come from evidence, not assumptions about physiological data. This is why RCMP continued focusing on hard information rather than test interpretations. Ultimately, Part 4 shows that polygraph results, while widely discussed, did not change the course of the investigation. They offered no breakthroughs and resolved no uncertainties. The search for answers continues to rely on verified data, community involvement, and ongoing analysis. The path forward remains grounded in evidence, not in machine readings. As the weeks turned into months, one of the most challenging aspects of the investigation became the widening gap between public expectations and investigative reality. Many people hoped that the release of documents or test results would provide a turning point, but RCMP continued emphasizing that progress relied on carefully verified evidence, not instant conclusions. The sheer scale of the search effort remained significant. Teams revisited areas more than once, looking for any indicator that might guide them. Even though nothing conclusive emerged, each sweep contributed to a clearer understanding of the terrain, weather patterns, and the children's typical play routes near the property. Digital analysis also continued. Investigators rechecked app logs, phone pings, and online activity to ensure no detail was overlooked. This type of work requires time, as each data point must be matched with context. Polygraph readings were not part of this technical analysis, reinforcing how secondary the test was. One key factor highlighted in the CBC reporting was the level of transparency shown by those closest to the children. From willingly sharing digital access to participating in polygraph exams, family members took steps to cooperate fully. However, cooperation alone could not resolve the uncertainty surrounding the children's whereabouts. This uncertainty created an online environment filled with speculation. Many discussions centered on the polygraph simply because it was one of the few concrete steps the public understood. But focusing too heavily on that single detail created misunderstandings about what the test could realistically offer investigators. RCMP continued urging the public to provide factual information rather than theories. With more than 740 submitted tips, investigators had to sort through numerous claims, separating verifiable observations from assumptions. Polygraphs did not influence how these tips were reviewed. The priority remained on objective details. The documents also revealed how much time investigators spent reconstructing the family's final verified movements before the disappearance. Camera footage from shopping trips, time-stamped receipts, and transportation records were matched piece by piece. This methodical approach helped eliminate many hypothetical scenarios. Investigators also placed significant value on understanding the children's routines, their play spots, familiar paths, and comfort zones around the home. These behavioral details helped shape search strategies far more than any physiological reading from a machine. The role of community involvement remained central. Volunteers helped cover challenging terrain, while local residents shared camera footage and neighborhood observations. These contributions offered tangible insights, often giving investigators more actionable information than any polygraph chart could provide. Throughout the investigation, RCMP maintained steady communication with the public. Their statements repeatedly clarified that the case remained active and that every piece of credible information was being examined. This consistency helped reduce confusion, even as online discussions continued to expand. Even though the polygraph results generated significant attention, they did not alter the underlying investigative priorities. RCMP continued to rely on location data, timeline verification, and regional searches. The absence of contradictory digital evidence reinforced that the polygraph was merely a supporting tool. The CBC documents made it clear that investigators were thorough in their review of digital trails. Each call, message, or app interaction needed to align with the timeline. Any inconsistency, no matter how small, had the potential to shift focus. Polygraphs offered none of this precision. The complexity of the case also stems from its rural environment. Dense forest, uneven terrain, and long distances make physical searches uniquely challenging. Weather conditions can erase clues quickly. These factors contributed to the ongoing difficulty, independent of any data gathered from polygraph testing. Despite the extensive challenges, the investigation did not lose momentum. Forensic teams continued reviewing collected items, while analysts revisited documents and tips. RCMP emphasized persistence rather than relying on any single tool or assumption. Part of what makes the Sullivan case so emotionally charged is the absence of confirmed indicators. Without clear direction, the public often gravitates toward familiar concepts such as polygraph results, hoping they hold definitive meaning. But experienced investigators know that real answers often come from unexpected sources. This is why RCMP widened their review to explore possible sightings, regional travel routes, and even camera footage from highway toll plazas. These steps produced no confirmed leads but demonstrated the depth of the investigative process, where every realistic possibility is methodically examined. Meanwhile, the family continued to express their hope that answers would emerge. Their cooperation with technical searches and interviews underscored the emotional toll of the situation. Still, public attention often returned to the polygraph, despite its limited relevance to the ongoing efforts. The case also highlighted broader questions about how the public understands investigative tools. Polygraphs, despite their familiarity, do not provide the kind of clarity people imagine. Their readings offer perspective, but not explanations. Their limitations become most obvious in sensitive cases like this one. As RCMP continued their work, they stressed that community assistance remained essential. Any real progress would come from verified information, not interpretations of physiological data. The combination of digital analysis, physical searches, and community reporting represented the core of the investigation. Ultimately, Part 5 shows that while polygraph results generated significant discussion, they played no central role in determining the direction of the investigation. Real answers will depend on evidence, not reaction readings. The search for clarity continues through thorough investigative work, community support, and unwavering attention to detail. As the investigation progressed, one central truth became clear: the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan required a multi-layered approach, far beyond the limits of any single investigative tool. RCMP continued to combine digital analysis, physical searches, and community outreach, while the polygraph remained only a minor footnote in the overall effort. The CBC documents revealed how investigators repeatedly returned to the verified timeline. Each hour between May 1st and May 2nd was re-examined using electronic trails. These digital markers, timestamps, signals, and logs created a factual backbone that shaped RCMP's understanding of events far more than any physiological reading. Investigators also revisited key areas around the property multiple times. Their ongoing work demonstrated that the physical environment still held the most potential for answers. The search zones were carefully mapped and reviewed, ensuring that no pathway, clearing, or common play area remained unchecked. Despite these efforts, the absence of clear indicators made the investigation especially challenging. Without confirmed sightings or physical evidence pointing in a specific direction, each possible lead required equal attention. Polygraph readings, on their own, could not provide direction or reduce uncertainty. Part 6 focuses on the broader perspective, how RCMP balanced public expectations with investigative priorities. While the public often fixated on the polygraph, investigators prioritized information supported by verifiable data. The gap between these two perspectives shaped much of the discussion surrounding the case. The CBC documents emphasized that RCMP continued to treat the case under the Missing Persons Act. This meant the focus remained on locating the children and understanding the circumstances surrounding their disappearance, rather than assigning responsibility. Polygraphs were never intended to shift that focus. As months passed, RCMP continued receiving new tips. Each submission required careful review. Even though many tips did not produce breakthroughs, investigators remained committed to examining all credible leads. Polygraph results did not influence how these tips were weighed or prioritized. Investigators also continued working with outside agencies and specialized units. Drone teams, ground search specialists, and digital analysts contributed their expertise. This collaborative approach ensured that no single detail or possibility was overlooked, reflecting the scale and seriousness of the investigation. Public concern remained strong, and this added emotional weight to the case. Many people hoped polygraph results could provide clarity, but investigators recognized that emotional expectations often exceeded the capabilities of the testing method. Maintaining realistic expectations became essential to public communication. The CBC documents also revealed the extensive efforts made in the early days of the search, including the verification of store visits, travel routes, and toll plaza footage. This level of detail showed how deeply RCMP committed to establishing a factual foundation for the case. In this context, the polygraph was treated simply as one more reference point. It served to confirm that physiological responses did not contradict the statements gathered. But it did not provide new information or guide future steps. Investigators remained focused on what could be proven. One major challenge for the public was understanding that a polygraph does not measure truth. It measures physical responses. These responses can align with honesty, stress, or uncertainty. Without external context, the readings cannot stand alone. This is why RCMP did not rely on them for decision-making. Over time, the discussion surrounding the polygraph became less about the investigation and more about how the public interprets investigative tools. Many viewers discovered that real-world investigations rely on nuance, patience, and data, not on quick answers or mechanical readings. Looking at the broader picture, RCMP continued to maintain open communication with the families involved. They also maintained a firm stance on respecting privacy while continuing their work. This balance ensured that cooperation remained strong while sensitive information stayed within investigative boundaries. Part of the challenge was the sheer amount of information submitted by the public. Thousands of videos, posts, and messages needed to be reviewed. RCMP had to carefully separate genuine observations from unrelated content. This ongoing analysis required significant time and resources. Meanwhile, investigators also examined environmental factors that could influence the case. Terrain conditions, weather changes, and seasonal effects all played roles in shaping search strategies. These elements often contributed more to the direction of the investigation than any physiological test result could. Even though polygraph discussions continued online, investigators stayed grounded in verified data. Digital signals, camera footage, and forensic review stayed at the center of their work. Polygraph readings remained supplementary, useful only in confirming internal consistency, not in providing explanations. The investigation also highlighted how rapidly misinformation can spread in high-profile cases. Because polygraphs are widely recognized, they can create outsized reactions. RCMP countered this by consistently reminding the public that conclusions must be based on evidence, not assumptions about technology. As Part 6 draws toward the current state of the case, it becomes clear that progress depends on continued investigation and credible information. Polygraph results may be discussed, but they cannot replace ground searches, digital analysis, or forensic evaluation. The search for truth remains rooted in factual work. Ultimately, Part 6 reinforces the central message. The Sullivan case requires patience, precision, and continued public cooperation. Polygraph tests may capture attention, but they cannot provide clarity on their own. Answers will come from evidence, persistence, and the collective effort to bring resolution to this complex and deeply emotional case. As the investigation moved forward, public interest remained intense. People across the country continued asking how such a disappearance could happen without clear indicators. Part 7 looks at how investigators balance public pressure with the need to protect the integrity of the case and why certain details could not be released. RCMP carefully controlled the information they shared. They released updates only when they could confirm accuracy, rejecting speculation. This deliberate approach helped prevent misinformation from influencing the investigation. Though some viewers wanted more transparency, investigators prioritized accuracy over speed. A common source of confusion was the difference between no evidence of wrongdoing and case resolved. RCMP made it clear that the case remained active, even though they had not identified signs pointing toward a definitive direction. This distinction is often misunderstood, but it's crucial in missing person investigations. Another factor complicating public understanding was the lack of new visible developments. Without major updates, many people turned their attention back to the polygraph results, repeating earlier discussions about their significance. But as RCMP emphasized, the test did not guide their decisions. During this period, investigators continued collaborating with multiple agencies to reevaluate certain regions. This included fresh reviews of terrain, waterways, and potential travel routes. Even without new clues, each reassessment ensured no early possibility was overlooked or incorrectly dismissed. One of the most persistent challenges was separating genuine leads from unrelated information. With so many viewers following the case online, RCMP received a constant stream of new tips. Many were well-intentioned but lacked verifiable details. Still, investigators reviewed each one carefully. The lack of confirmed sightings of Lilly or Jack remained the most difficult part of the case. Even with widespread media attention, community involvement, and interagency cooperation, no reliable sighting emerged. This absence created uncertainty that no polygraph reading could address. Search teams also had to account for the changing landscape. Over time, weather, plant growth, and natural shifts in the environment can alter terrain. Teams revisited certain areas to account for these seasonal changes, ensuring no location was ruled out prematurely. The CBC documents highlighted how early efforts included checking nearby roads, wooded areas, and travel routes. In Part 7, these details help illustrate how expansive the initial search truly was. These early steps remain some of the most significant in shaping the direction of the investigation. While public discussion often centered on human factors, polygraph results, interviews, and statements, RCMP consistently returned to physical evidence and digital records. These objective data points formed the backbone of their understanding of the timeline. The public's emotional investment meant that even routine updates were heavily analyzed. Viewers speculated about body language, word choices, and social media activity. But investigators stressed that such interpretations are unreliable and can distract from factual information. Another complication was the presence of online content creators discussing the case. While some focused on factual information, others unintentionally spread assumptions. RCMP addressed this by encouraging the public to rely only on official updates and verified reporting. Meanwhile, the family remained at the center of the emotional impact. Their cooperation with investigators and participation in interviews demonstrated their willingness to support the process. But they too were affected by public speculation, which often misinterpreted limited information. RCMP's cautious communication style served to maintain fairness toward all involved. By withholding unconfirmed details, they ensured that no individual was incorrectly labeled or treated unfairly. This included being careful with how polygraph results were referenced, avoiding misinterpretation. The documents also highlighted how investigators checked regional travel footage. Toll plaza recordings, store cameras, and roadway surveillance were reviewed not just once, but multiple times. This confirmed that the children had not been seen traveling on major routes during the critical window. Despite thorough digital review, no irregularities were found in the logs from the devices associated with Malehya or Daniel during the relevant period. Their electronic patterns matched their statements, reinforcing RCMP's careful classification of the investigation as non-criminal at that stage. Still, the absence of contradictions did not simplify the case. Missing person investigations often require long-term effort. Even when data aligns, the lack of direction can complicate progress. This was exactly the situation investigators faced with the Sullivan case. Community involvement remained essential. Local residents continued sharing camera footage, reporting observations, and offering help in searches. RCMP acknowledged the ongoing support as a critical component of the investigation, highlighting the importance of accurate public involvement. As Part 7 progresses, the overarching message becomes clear. Even with extensive digital trails, physical searches, interviews, and polygraph readings, the central question remains unanswered. The case depends on continued diligence rather than assumptions about any single tool. Ultimately, Part 7 reinforces that the Sullivan investigation remains open, active, and grounded in verified information. Polygraphs may draw public attention, but the real work lies in methodical searching, careful analysis, and ongoing community support. The search for answers continues, step by step, guided by evidence not speculation. As we reach the end of this update, one thing remains clear. The search for answers in the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan is far from over. Despite thousands of tips, extensive searches, and broad public involvement, the case continues to rely on verified information rather than assumptions. Tools like polygraph tests may capture public attention, but they cannot provide the clarity that only evidence can. What truly matters now is continued focus, patience, and careful review of every credible detail. RCMP investigators still approach this case with determination, examining digital records, community submissions, and environmental factors. Their work extends far beyond any single test or headline. The families involved continue to navigate uncertainty, and the wider community remains hopeful for progress. Each day without answers is difficult, but cases like this require persistence. Every step, no matter how small, contributes to the larger effort of understanding what happened. If you have followed this case, you know how important factual information is. Rumors, assumptions, and speculation can easily overshadow real leads. That is why sharing only verified observations matters. If you are someone who lives in the region, drives nearby routes, or has access to any form of relevant footage, even a small detail could help. Investigators encourage anyone with credible information to reach out through official channels. This is True Child Cases, where we follow the facts with respect and clarity. If you want continuing updates on the search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan, and deeper breakdowns grounded in documented information, consider subscribing. Your engagement helps keep attention on cases that still need answers. Share this video responsibly, support families facing uncertainty, and stay committed to the truth. Together, we continue to shine a light on stories that must not be forgotten.